Welcome everyone to Beast Machines, where if everything goes according to plan, we're going to be discussing the entirety of the Beast Machines cartoon, one episode at a time, one day at a time, throughout the rest of the month of May. If it all goes according to plan. Should. It's working well so far. So, thank you guys for the support on Patreon that made this series happen. Of course, if you want to see more series covered in this review style, you can go follow and support over on Patreon. The higher it gets, the more I unlock and the more I will be doing. So, let's talk about the reformatting. Episode 1 of Beast Machines. And so, we know that they wanted a fresh start. They wanted this to be like something completely separated from Beast Wars as much as they could, to the point where both Hasbro and Mainframe did not really want the new writers of the show watching Beast Wars before this. They got like cliff notes, they got references they could use, but that's largely it. For the most part, they were flying blind and just mostly for the desire to create a completely new Transformers show and experience that wasn't pulling from anything. They felt at the time that anything that would have followed up on Beast Wars directly would have been too referential, which is going to be really ironic considering a lot of the references that will be used in this series. So, with that in mind, the opening of this episode is just like a complete shock because it's Optimus Primal back in his base body running from a horde of Cybertronian tanks across Cybertron. And what's weird about this is that if you know Beast Wars, you followed it for 3 seasons, okay, you understand like there's something going on, but it's still super confusing because we're just dropped right in the middle of it with no setup, no establishment, no nothing. If you're going for a fresh start, this is a lot to take in. You don't know the characters, you don't know the setting, you don't know what happened, and you don't know why it's important that Optimus Primal just looks like a normal gorilla again and not any of his transmetal forms. It's a weird way to start, because I'm not entirely sure who it's starting for, but it's an interesting start at the very least, right? Okay, so it's interesting at the least. So, okay, yeah. We get little teases of what the show is going to be about. We get exactly one shot of a flower on Cybertron, just to show that, yes, it's a possible thing. It's a hint of things to come. Another one of those, like, oh, that's weird. This is one of those shows where, like, the longer you know Transformers, the weirder all this gets. So yeah, it's a lot to take in brand new. But throughout the course of the early part of this episode, we regroup with 4 of the Maximals we saw in the final episode of Beast Wars. They're all back in normal form with no explanation. They don't seem to even acknowledge the fact that all the other companions are gone. So if you're a fan of the previous series, that raises a question in your head. If you're one of those starting fresh, okay, you're not even going to know that Silverbolt and Rhinox were a thing. All right, so at least that part's fair. It's a lot of being chased and shot at by Viacons. It's a lot of just chasing each other down. The Maximals chasing each other down until they end up deep into Cybertron, where they actually encounter the Oracle. Pulled there by Optimus Primal because he has what we come to find out was a receptive spark, which really kind of makes me wonder, throughout all of Megatron's invasion of Cybertron and like the whole hostile takeover of the Viacons, there's literally nobody else on the planet with a receptive spark that you could have like pulled down here and actually like saved this planet sooner. Like, I'm just really curious. It's really just Primal? There's reasoning for it later. I think it's really stupid reasoning, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later on. All right, so yeah, we get to meet the Oracle, which of course is something that's never existed before, as this ancient mystical supercomputer thing, and it essentially is like a bridge between living Transformers and the Allspark, which now the Matrix, which has been kind of like a catch term for just like the origin and the destination for Cybertronian sparks. Now we've kind of retconned that into the Allspark. So we've completely changed, like, for lack of better terminology, we've changed the whole religion of Transformers that we pretty much kind of established in Beast Wars. We've introduced another supercomputer that's not Vector Sigma that gives Transformers life, and this one is apparently some psychic oracle thing that waited for a receptive spark to lift a finger to save the planet. It's a weird situation. But the Oracle is capable of reformatting Optimus Primal and then the rest of the Maximals into their brand new forms, which are now, the terminology we will get later on is Technorganic. It is a hybrid design between organic and mechanical. And to be honest, I've never been a fan of how it looks. The toys tried it one way, the show tried it a different way. I don't really think either really looks great. If I'm being honest, the design work on the new Maximal bodies just feels way too busy. It just feels like the details are all over the place. They're meshing a little, they're intentionally not meshing, which I think is the opposite of what they were going for. But that's kind of how it comes across. And just overall, just like, I don't like the aesthetic of the series. So we're going to get that established right away. I'm not a fan of how the show looks or the designs in the show. Yeah, so, okay, what else do we talk about? Okay, so there is a good moment of tension when the Maximals try to use their transformation call in order to transform, and nothing happens. That's a really good tense moment. If you're familiar with Beast Wars, again, if you're starting fresh with this series, that moment has no context whatsoever. So I'm keep pointing that out because the Hasbro and Mainframe specifically didn't want it to connect to Beast Wars more than it had to, and yet they keep throwing in all these references to Beast Wars even in the first episode because it's kind of necessary. But when they're trying to start clean, this makes it not a clean like transition between one show to the other. Like there's this. It's necessary if you know the context, but we're not supposed to know the context because they wanted to start over. I don't know. They're trying to have it both ways, and it didn't work in either direction. That's where I'm coming from here. There's a few things about the episode that are a little bit weird. Number one, they do mention the first Transformers coming to Cybertron. That's not how it worked. This is based on the original cartoon. With a little bit of the Marvel comics thrown in, but largely the fiction we get in Beast Wars is based off of G1 cartoon canon, where all Transformers are built on Cybertron. So, incorrect. You could argue it. You could argue it's based on the Marvel, but even in Marvel, I don't think they came to Cybertron if I remember correctly. Let's see. Primal had a really tense moment where he's falling into a chasm. He's super lucky that he figured out his robot mode really fast and that his robot mode had a jetpack. That was really handy for the moment. He's gotten super cryptic. Like, they're trying to push this whole, like, spiritual thing. And when you're encountering something that is something of, like, a demigod in Transformers, okay, fine. You're having a spiritual awakening. But he goes like all of a sudden he gets like super cryptic. Like he's already in that mindset of like, you've got to find your answers yourself. It's weird. Like, and this is just like the first taste of it too. What else can we talk about here? Yeah, I guess Megatron, since he just came up on screen. The only time all we get of Megatron in this episode is just him mentioning what his like mindset is right now, which is the purge of organics from Cybertron. And it just doesn't feel right, like Megatron sought the conquest of Cybertron, and he sought it through very extreme means. But at no point did he show any kind of hostility or disregard for the organics. I mean, there's even times where he seemed to enjoy having this organic side to him. We've seen him brushing his T-Rex's teeth. You know, like, we've seen him transform into T-Rex mode and then later, just for the sake of being in that mode, for no other reason. Clearly, he didn't mind the organics that were part of him before. Now, all of a sudden, he's got a problem with it. I don't know. So, yeah, that's basically what I have for episode 1. It's trying to establish the new formula for how the show is going to work and like the new setting and the new bodies. It's rough. It feels very, very mixed because they were trying to start fresh but also being super referential to the original series. So you really had to know all 3 seasons of Beast Wars to really understand what's going on here. And then you get a whole bunch of stuff like Megatron, who doesn't really make sense in the long run. So it doesn't really fit for a fresh start or a veteran fan for the previous 3 years. So for that reason, I'm giving it a passable grade, which means that it is not really good or bad, which is not really a score you want for episode 1 of a new series. I'll be honest, watching through this whole series, I wasn't even sure I was going to use those same 5 scales that I used before, but ultimately I think I'm going to, because I want to highlight, because this is part of Beast Wars canon, I want to highlight just how different my opinion is of this series compared to Beast Wars, and hopefully this series of reviews is going to explain it in a little bit more detail and context. So that is the Reformatting, episode 1 of Beast Machines. Stay tuned. I'm going to try and get these out every day for the rest of the month. So hopefully you will not be waiting long to see the rest of it. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.